This happened to me about 2 years ago when I was driving home from New York down to Tennessee to visit one of my friends from college. I made the trip alone because I actually like driving long distance by myself. I usually just listen to podcasts or music the whole way and stop whenever I feel tired. I left early in the morning thinking I could probably make the whole drive in one shot, but by the time it got late, I realized I was way too exhausted to safely keep driving. It was around 1 in the morning at that point, and I was somewhere in Virginia off a highway I don't remember anymore. I pulled off at one of those blue sign exits that only has a gas station, a food place, and a couple old motels. I chose the cheapest motel because I honestly just needed somewhere to sleep for a few hours. The place looked pretty rough from the outside. It was one of those 2-floor motels where every room faces the parking lot. You know, the motel from every scary movie ever. Half the lights outside were out, and there were barely any cars there. Slow night, I guess. I almost left and found another place, but I was so tired, and honestly, I was looking for a bed, not some glamorous resort. The front office was behind thick glass, even though it was open. The guy working there looked like he was in his 50s. He barely even looked up when I walked in. I paid for the room, got my key card, and asked if they had many vacancies. He said most of the rooms upstairs were empty. I remember that because it made me feel a little better knowing there wouldn't be people making noise all night. Oh boy, the irony of that. My room was on the 2nd floor near the far end of the building. The room was old-fashioned, but for the money, that was expected. There was a weird smell to be expected in an old hotel or motel. The room was humid as hell, but the AC made such a horrible rattling noise that I just left it off. I honestly considered just sleeping in my car instead, but I was already there and too tired to care anymore. I locked the door, shut the blinds. I took a shower and laid down on the bed with the TV on low volume. I was in bed for around 20 minutes before I started hearing arguing next door. Sounded like a couple fighting. Oh great. The walls were thin enough that I could hear muffled voices, but not clearly enough to make out full sentences. I was annoyed because I thought it was going to keep me awake all night. One voice sounded deeper and angry, while the other sounded softer. The weird thing was the softer voice didn't sound female exactly. It sounded like someone mimicking a woman's voice, an obvious higher-pitched voice coming from a man. The argument kept going back and forth for a while. One voice would get loud and aggressive, and then the other would respond sounding serious, and then the other would respond sounding nervous. I started noticing something strange, though. The timing between the voices felt suspiciously perfect. There was never any overlap, like in basically any real fight. Each voice waited perfectly for the other to finish. I turned my TV volume down and sat there listening closer. That's when it hit me, that it was one guy doing both voices. Once I realized, I couldn't unhear it. The deeper voice sounded natural, but the softer voice sounded like the same man trying to imitate somebody else, I guess a female. I remember feeling this weird pit in my stomach because it suddenly changed the entire situation from an annoying argument to something seriously disturbing. No matter how I tried to explain it away or rationalize it, I would realize it just didn't make any sense. The so-called argument kept going for another few minutes before suddenly stopping completely for there to just be silence. I remember laying there, staring at the ceiling, hoping maybe the guy had finally gotten tired of whatever the hell he was doing. Then I heard a few slow knocks on the wall beside my bed. A fist hitting the wall like you'd knock on a door. My head shot to the left. Then I heard this muffled voice through the wall saying, "I hear you in there." I held my breath. Then the guy knocked again and said the same thing again, like he was waiting for acknowledgement. He was trying to do some creepy, playful voice, like he found something funny. I wasn't having any of this. I grabbed the remote and turned the TV volume up, trying to drown him out. For maybe 30 seconds, there was no sound at all. Then I heard the vibration of a door opening outside. Hearing that instantly made my heart start racing because I knew he had left his room. I muted the TV and listened carefully. I could feel the vibration of footsteps on the balcony outside approach my room. My blinds were fully shut, except for a tiny crack near the edge where they didn't fully meet the wall. I kept staring at that crack, wondering if I should look or not. Part of me thought I was just making the situation scarier in my head than it actually was. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I walked slowly to the window and pulled the blinds apart just enough to see outside. The second I looked through, I saw a man standing right outside my window trying to look in. His face was so close to the glass that it made me jump backward immediately. We definitely made eye contact for a split second. His eyes looked wide open. The second I moved away from the window, he started making these weird voices outside. I promise this when I say he sounded like he was imitating characters. I don't know what characters, but he was having a whole creepy voice acting practice outside my motel room door. Then he started knocking on my door while changing his voice over and over. 1 second he sounded high-pitched and childish, then suddenly deep and angry. I remember one of the voices sounding like an exaggerated southern accent. It would have sounded ridiculous, maybe even funny in any normal situation, but hearing it outside my motel room at nearly 2 in the morning terrified me. This was obviously a sick, mentally ill person. The knocking kept getting harder. Not enough to break the door down, but enough that I thought the whole motel could hear it. I called the front office immediately and told the guy that somebody outside my room was acting insane and wouldn't leave me alone. The guy sounded irritated at first until he probably heard the banging through the phone. Then his tone changed and he said he'd come up right away. The guy outside kept switching voices and knocking for another minute or two. Then suddenly it stopped completely. I looked through the peephole and saw him speed walking back into the room beside mine. A few seconds later, the motel worker came upstairs carrying a flashlight and his other hand on his holster. He knocked on the door next to mine after seeing the guy speed off into that room, and he started trying to talk to the guy inside. I couldn't hear everything clearly, but he kept asking him to open the door. There was no answer at all from inside. The worker stood there for maybe a minute before finally coming over to me. I opened the door and explained everything that happened. The worker hesitated for a second before saying the guy had been staying there for a while. That answer alone made me want to leave immediately. I asked if I could switch rooms and he said yes. He moved me to a room downstairs near the front office right by my car. I grabbed my few belongings as fast as possible and followed him down there. The new room was basically identical to the first one, except not next to a mentally ill person. I remember feeling relieved once I locked myself inside, because I figured there was no way the guy would bother me again after management got involved. I turned the TV on quietly and sat awake for a while, replaying the whole thing in my head. Eventually, exhaustion caught up to me, and I started drifting off. I don't know how much time passed before I woke up again, but it was still dark outside.